I'm Forrest Campbell. Before I was injured, I was an electrician by trade. So I was on the tools every day. I was working, doing residential, commercial, industrial work, making a good living, running my own business. I had 2 kids to make sure that they had food on the table. My wife worked part-time as well. She had her own business going at the time. Then, March 15th, 2015 came around and I sustained my injury. And at that point, it was a huge worry for me because how was I supposed to go back to work doing what I did before? My injury level of spinal cord injury level was C6-7. So although I have good shoulder and upper arm function, my hands do not have very good function. Being able to go back to work as an electrician wasn't an option on the tools anyways. I probably could have worked as, admin in an office of an electrical company, but where I was living was a pretty small town and they really didn't have the need for someone to do that. The owners of the company usually just took care of all of it. After a couple of attempts to try and propose those sort of situations to local companies in the town I was living in, I said, screw it, I'm gonna upskill, I'm gonna retrain. I went into solar and renewable energy. So I took a 18-month certificate at a place down in Peonia, Colorado, called Solar Energy International, and came away with basically a solar engineering ticket and technical sales certificate. That set me up to create my own business in North America and Canada called Freewheeling Energy, and I designed and sold solar arrays, basically from my house and my garage, and then subcontracted out the install to basically any qualified electrician that I could get to do it, which was good. It was the step forward I needed to give me the confidence that I knew that I could go to work and get things done. In the meantime, my wife's Australian, my kids are dual citizens. So I was able to get a permanent residency from Australia 2011 when we first came and visited. So luckily I was able to get a returning resident visa and move back to Australia. And the main goal there is, there's lots of sun in Australia. Solar is big. So I was really...
There is a lot of sun in Australia, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was really keen on getting into the solar industry, renewable energy industry here. January of 2020, I had a job working as a sales and designer for just a local small solar installer. It was great. It was only 15 hours a week to start with, and he was happy with me just working from home. He set me up with all the design software and everything like that, and that was kind of right when COVID was hitting, so we were doing a lot of our sales pitches actually online through Zoom. Unfortunately, he just wasn't growing, and I needed to make more money. And then I moved on to a company called Autonomous Energy, designing solar for commercial size and industrial size buildings. It was great because that's where I wanted to go. You go from residential and you move up and you get into bigger systems. Decided that they had moved into being taken over by a larger company, and it was getting very, very corporate. And I felt like I was becoming more of just a tick a box in the company. I was the token guy in a wheelchair. I didn't really have any place to improve into in the company, so I thought I'd better make a change. So from there, I completely flipped over everything I've been doing in the past of my life and dealing with electricity and renewable energy and became an employment coach.
Forrest, I've actually done an episode with employability years and years ago about discrimination and some of the misconceptions of the workplace. But something we've never really discussed, which I guess a lot of people, when they talk about employment and disability, how it's disproportionately higher from able-bodied people, the unemployment rate. There isn't a whole lot of employers that are hiring people with disabilities that have career progression, anything like that. There could be also people with disabilities who feel like they are more comfortable to apply for other companies that have something to do with disability because they feel like, they might not be prepared for going into, commercial market or whatever it is. Something else that people don't really discuss is that people with disabilities could be, in your situation, a husband, a father, primary bread earner, formally, and we have bills to pay. Bills and rent and mortgage do not stop. The actual need for being employed is really high because we have the exact same living expenses as everybody else, if not more, depending on how much your NDIS is technically funding, and you might have to pay out of pocket for quite a number of other things.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, yeah, life doesn't change when you have, like, as in when it comes to mortgages and bills and all that sort of stuff, car payments, everything like that still carries on, whether you have an injury or you don't have an injury. Definitely. So, yeah, when I got injured, it was high on my priority list to find a way to be able to get back to supporting my family. And in Canada, unfortunately, there was no support for anybody. There was no NDIS or anything like that, unfortunately. Everything was out of pocket. So literally within the first 18 months of me coming home, we pretty much cleared up most of our life savings doing renovations on the house and buying an accessible vehicle. I had to sell camper trailers. I had to sell boat. I had to sell. And in the end, we ended up having to sell the house and the vehicle as well so that we could fund moving to here. After 18 months, 2 years, it was close to $300,000 worth of, expenses out of our own pockets that we had to do just to make it so that I could live. So that being said, working was absolute paramount, and I had to get it done no matter what. So we couldn't rely on life savings and everything forever. So employment, it was very, very, very important for me at that point in time, and I just had to put my head down and go figure out what I had to do.
Side question. So in Canada, do you guys have a socialized healthcare system?
Yeah, we do, definitely. And it's supposed to be this beautiful, free healthcare system. But when it comes to disability, there's no support, unfortunately.
Right. Okay. But it's not quite the same as the United States is it? I mean...
No, because the United States has the American Disability Act, the ADA, and that has a huge impact from war vets. So that's what brought about the American Disability Association. So no, Canada doesn't have that. No matter what you do, you're always fighting for accessibility. They just don't see the value in it there for some reason. I mean, when you go into the big cities and you go into like the main, shops and stuff, obviously they've got, sliding doors and elevators and things like that, but you're in the big city. When you live rurally, there's no curb cutouts, there's no wheelchair parking. If there is a wheelchair spot in the wintertime, it's a big pile of snow because they can't be bothered to move the snow someplace else. The advocacy and the anger that comes about from that is horrendous. And they don't have that. So you're constantly fighting and fighting and fighting just to stay in your house. Because a lot of times they'll go, okay, well you're disabled, but we can't pay you what you're worth because you're not going to do the job that you're supposed to do. It's really bad. Like the discrimination towards people with disability there, especially entering into the workforce, is really sad.
What was your first impressions when you came to Australia from Canada and trying to find work?
Well, I found it much more open, to tell you the truth. Like I found work with a guy that was, willing to take me on and valued me for my skills and my knowledge. Which was great, which was really cool. And I actually wasn't really even expecting it from the one guy that I worked with.
Well, you had such a low bar, Forrest. I mean,
The bar was set pretty low. And then honestly, the second company that I worked for, they headhunted me. All I did is I had to call them up to get a little bit of information about one of their systems that they installed that we were working on. And like a week later, their HR department called me up and said, "Do you want to work here?" So we'll give you a little bit more money. And the thing is, they were going to give me 30 hours a week as well. So I could, again, that drive to be able to make money. I was, at that point, we're now paying rent here in Australia. So to be able to cover the rent, same sort of thing. Bills are always there. Maybe I just got lucky and found two companies that were, had great people working for them. I'm not sure. I hear a lot of other very, very unfortunate circumstances through the people that I work with now. that are here in Australia. So I know that it happens here, the discrimination against people with disability. That's part of the whole employability, and now the new portion, the building employer confidence side of the employability of, building employer confidence is basically the way it works. Is we're trying to work with employers to make them feel confident to take people with a disability into their workforce and make them feel comfortable.
So what do you think is making employers feel nervous about taking on somebody with a disability, just like from your observations?
Fear of the unknown, really, is what it comes down to. They don't know. There's so many things that you can go out and you can research it till you're blue in the face, but you just never know what somebody's going to need depending on their disability when they come into a workplace. And I think it's that fear, and it's a long-term fear that people with disability take more time off work, that they're not as productive. All of these sort of myths that, there's another one that, they'll make the workforce feel uncomfortable. All of those myths we're dispelling. We're pushing those to the side and teaching people that through just straight knowledge, these are not concerns that you should have. And there's stats out there that show that companies that have people with disability are more productive. They've got a much healthier and happier workforce, and their retention for people is higher. Just trying to get that message out to people is really important, and that's how we start breaking down the stigma and the barriers behind people with disability, because the skilled people that are out there are unbelievable, and the job force in Australia needs more skilled workers. So it's just an open bucket of talent that can be drawn on, I think.
Forrest, let me run a scenario by you and you just give me your thoughts, right? Mm-hmm. So let's just say somebody's going to apply for a job somewhere, and part of the job application requires you to discuss your disability for some reason. I mean, what are your thoughts on that? Because there are some companies out there that would say, do you have a disability? Yes, no. If you do, sometimes they'll say something like, do you have any adjustments that need to be made to the workplace? That I feel like is a reasonable request. But there are some other places that are like, tell us more about your disability rather than the actual skill set itself. And so I don't know if it's really building employer confidence, is it's more about, what are you doing? You're not really focusing on the skills. There could be people that might think, is this a token hire?
Well, with the Australian Disability Discrimination Act, you honestly don't even have to let an employer know that you have a disability unless it's going to impact your performance of that job. So obviously, if you're in a wheelchair and you're applying to do, stock shelves at Woolworths, there's going to have to be a bit of a conversation there. But like, say somebody who's, a paraplegic who's got full upper body and arm function, and they're looking to get a job as an accountant. There's no way that their disability is going to affect that job. You know what? The skill set is there. They've got the function to do it. Everything is good to go. And at that point, if an employer is asking about the disability, I think that's searching for an excuse to not hire. Do you know what I mean? And it's definitely, it's something that the privacy situation is, the privacy laws are, you can't really go, okay, you've got a disability, how does it affect you? Do you know what I mean? Like, that's like asking somebody to share their, what do you do in the shower in the morning? You know what I mean? Like, it's inappropriate conversation to have with somebody with a disability, I think.
I think it's inappropriate conversation to have if it's trying to make somebody different. Do you know what I mean? So, So to even have that sort of example, which is actually a real example of an application process for some companies out there, it just kind of seems to me that they're trying to either, like you said, weed out, to then not maybe not employ them, or make it more than what it is. So, you know, you could have all the skills. You really shouldn't have to then in detail disclose your disability and experiences when it comes to... No.
100% no.
And it's just so bizarre.
100% no. You know, for myself, any job that I'm going to be able to, that I'm going to have to do, I mean, I'm going to have to talk to the employer. Like even going to an interview, you know, if I'm doing a face-to-face interview, I need to make sure that the place is accessible to get into. I've got to be able to get into the office, get into the interview room, you know, have space in the office to roll around in, that sort of thing as well. So for me, with my level of injury, I'm like with any job that I ever apply for, first thing, it's written right in my cover letter, you know.
Okay, so you disclose up front?
Absolutely. Yeah, and I'm very open about it. Like, but I mean, it's also a very visual disability, you know, like it's not like somebody's going to look at me and go, oh, yeah, you're able-bodied, right? You know, I'm wheeling around in a wheelchair and, you know, I've usually got, you know, little funny little styluses stuck to my fingers so that I can type. And, you know, it's obvious, but the skill set that I have and I bring along with me is something that should outshine any physical disability. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think that's what employers need to realize is exactly that. Like, you can't judge a book by its cover. You could look at me and go, oh, poor guy can't even use a computer. Well, actually, I'm really good on computers, to tell you the honest truth. I'm probably better than you. Anyways, it's just, I just dispelling the myth and, you know, making, changing that societal preconceived idea of what people with disability can do for them in a workplace.
Yeah, and I guess it also forces employers to have to, you know, also understand why somebody wouldn't mention their disability in their cover letter or in their resume anywhere. Because maybe they've been burned 1,000 times before and they're just feeling really defeated. Like, you know, that kind of thing. So I completely understand both sides of that. Why you'd want to mention it and why you wouldn't want to mention it.
And it's completely personal. It's up to the person applying for the job. And that's the freedom that they need to be able to have. Because, I mean, there's lots of folks out there that have a disability, but it's quite hidden. You know, you don't really actually see it. And so if that's the case, why do you need to mention that to somebody? Why does that even need to be on the job application? I guess that comes down to another thing, is teaching employers how to have inclusive job applications. Just even the language and the wording on those job applications can be made disability friendly. You know, just in the fact that you don't have something like that. Are you disabled or do you have a disability? That is something that should never, ever be on a job application.
And as somebody once pointed out to me, who has depression problems, there is not one point of a job application where they say, do you have depression? And then you have to tick a box.
Yeah, exactly.
Because because they're still walking around and their skills and whatever, they've got the job and they might have some mental health issues, but at no point are they like, do you have depression?
Yeah, right. No, they're not asking you that. That's exactly it. So the privacy side of things is definitely important for sure when you're hiring people with disability. I think having a tick a box, do you have a disability on an application form is definitely discriminatory.
As we wrap up this episode, do you have what is your biggest advice that you would give to an employer who, let's say, for example, has never hired anybody with a disability that they know of, and they want to try and take on more people with disabilities in their workforce? What's your one piece of advice that you'd like to give to them?
I would say get a hold of us at Employability at the Building Employer Confidence, and we will guide you through the process of becoming disability inclusive. We've got disability awareness training that we can offer them for staff, managers, HR departments, everything. If you're committed to it, the people are out there that are willing to give you the time to make it happen for you.
Yeah, 100%. All right, Forrest, thank you very much.
You're welcome.